What if scientists have been hiding the greatest threat to humanity? I'm Ruth Leedy Carr, and for over 40 years, evidence has mounted of a coming polar shift, a secret buried in the words of Asimov and Sagan, and in the mysterious glowing poles of a hollow Mars.
Hello, folks. I'm Ruth Leedy Carr, author of Polar Hole Light in Europe's Clouds and Tipping Point for a Hollow Earth. How did a rather typical piano teacher and church organist, living a quiet life in suburban Wilmington, Delaware, become transformed into a firebrand, proclaiming that Upper Europe will soon be swallowed up by a polar hole that will reveal a central sun's light shining up into the clouds, and that Japan and Hawaii and the western edge of the United States will be permanently swamped by high seas, and even proclaiming that hollow Mars may soon collapse and threaten the Earth? The change didn't happen overnight. My first husband, Michael Callanan, and his friend Ken Yarnell were discussing UFO-related mysteries one day when Ken informed us that some people believe there are holes at the poles where UFOs come and go. I was irritated and wondered what the fringe theorists would come up with next. A hole in the pole? Really? Sometime later, Michael and I were at Newark, Delaware's used bookstore, and he noticed that I had not picked up any books to buy and urged me to do so. Then he reached over to a nearby shelf and picked up 2 books that were lying there. One was about Edgar Cayce's psychic readings on healing, which Michael thought would interest me because of my back pains and so on. The other was Jess Stern's book, Edgar Cayce, The Sleeping Prophet. I wouldn't have chosen those books because psychic predictions and advice did not interest me. But I took this opportunity to read something new. Stern was a journalist. His book was well written, a bestseller. He had found a geologist who agreed with Edgar Cayce's prophecy of an imminent shift of Earth's axis. Cayce was not a prophet himself. Another voice spoke through him when he was in a trance. So the geologist was agreeing with this mysterious voice coming from who knows where. The geologist also was mysterious. He chose to speak anonymously. In Stern's book, he's just referred to as the geologist. I learned a few things about anonymous sources while studying for my degree in journalism at Indiana University. Big stories often begin with anonymous tips, sometimes called leaks. The reporter may not even know who the source is. Reporters have often gone to jail rather than reveal the identity of their sources, who may fear retaliation. I thought it was peculiar that the geologist would announce something as momentous as an imminent shift in Earth's axis without giving his name. Usually when a scientist uncovers something huge or amazing, he or she will be eager to report that in a scientific journal and perhaps even collect a Nobel Prize. Was he afraid to go public? Was Jess Stern afraid to give a proper headline to what the geologist had said? A coming reversal of Earth's magnetic field for which we are overdue is likely to shift the axis, the geologist said. But he left out 2 important points. He didn't say why a geomagnetic field reversal will shift the axis. And he had nothing to say about Cayce's prophecy that, quote, his light will be seen again in the clouds, unquote, after 1998. The axis shift was predicted for the year 2000. So it appeared that some kind of light show in the clouds was predicted to occur with the axis shift. I started reading about reversals in the Earth's magnetic field. I wrote a long poem based on the Cayce prophecies of Earth changes. My imagination was starting to take off with this subject. I found Raymond Bernard's book, The Hollow Earth, at a used bookstore in Newark, that same one. But I didn't buy it. Then later I thought, well, it's only $1. I went back and looked for it, and it was still there, so I bought it. I didn't want to be filling my mind with nonsense, which I was sure the hollow earth theory would be. But this would be a challenge for me to see if I could practice the journalistic objectivity I had learned about at IU. If I hadn't had that journalistic training, I'm pretty sure I wouldn't have bothered with the book. Could I give these silly, crazy ideas a fair hearing, as it were? I accepted this challenge. Bernard's book began dramatically with a tale of Rear Admiral Richard E. Byrd's 1926 flight through the South Polar opening. He saw lush forests and a creature resembling a woolly mammoth. This was intriguing, but it didn't prove anything, since Byrd didn't talk about any such trip later in his life that I know of. I couldn't deny that all this talk about polar openings and the central sun's light shining through the openings did seem to relate to the Cayce prophecies of light in the clouds. If you assumed that a new axis was coming and that polar holes had to be located at the axis, then the light in clouds prophecy made sense. Marshall Gardner's book, A Journey to the Earth's Interior, which I ordered, made the important point that orbiting matter, that is, the Earth's shell orbiting its central star, cannot remain stationary at the axis. So if the axis were to move, a hole would have to open up at the new axis, and the inner sun would show up through the new hole, shining in the clouds. The hollow earth theory was giving me a glimpse of what the cataclysmic prophecies of Cayce and even Christ himself might mean. I didn't switch over to the hollow earth theory all at once in my mind. I went back and forth. I had two tracks in my head at the same time. On one track, the hollow earth theory was all wrong. On the other track, that theory was absolutely correct. I didn't have to make a choice. I could believe both things together at the same time. Believing the earth was hollow made me feel very lonely, off in a wilderness by myself. By reading science books, I learned that the Earth's magnetic field deflects and funnels the solar wind to the magnetic pole, or each magnetic pole. It seemed so clear. That powerful force must be defining the Earth's axis. So, if the magnetic poles were soon to migrate to the opposite hemisphere from where they were now, as predicted by many experts, the solar wind would be deflected to those new positions, and a new axis would be the result. You didn't have to believe in polar holes to understand why a new axis was likely to shift in the near future. The September 1980 issue of Mother Earth News arrived in late summer as part of a gift subscription that my sister Lorene had given me. On front it asked, 30 years to Armageddon? Isaac Asimov had predicted the end of civilization by 2010. Civilization will most likely end, he was saying, or civilization as we know it. But the odd thing was his statement that future space pioneers will, quote, hollow out the many planets, unquote. This seemed to refer to the idea of a hollow planet. There was another example like that. If Earth is viewed as a spaceship, he said, quote, we are used to living on the outside of the hull, unquote. Elsewhere, he said, future space pioneers will be living, quote, inside a world, unquote. But in fact, he was only describing their closed-in existence. That's not living inside a world. That's living in an inside world, something completely different from living inside a world. So I had found 3 examples of hollow planet language. It was disturbing that he seemed to be showing that civilization was in danger from something relating to the hollow planet theory, but he wasn't explaining it. It seemed like he was flaunting secret knowledge about a hollow planet disaster while still withholding it from us. This disturbing thought was like a thundercloud, but then it came to me that he actually was probably trying his best to share this knowledge, but was somehow prevented from making it totally clear. The story included many photos of him, looking somber in each picture. He had made a sudden switch from a villain to a hero in my mind, and I started to cry, and I cried probably longer than I have ever cried. Reading Asimov's works, I found what appeared to be more hints of a cataclysmic cover-up. I initially thought Carl Sagan was supporting the cover-up because he was so scathing in his criticism of Immanuel Velikovsky. I wasn't a supporter of Velikovsky's notions about Venus causing a cataclysm on Earth, but I felt Sagan was too harsh. Sagan's book titled Broca's Brain sounded like broke his brain to me, and initially I thought that language sounded like a threat. As time, though, I realized that Sagan could be using that language to describe his own predicament, not to threaten other people. So I came to see both Sagan and Asimov as dropping cataclysmic hints in defiance of a cover-up. After reading a number of library books about Earth science, I came up with arguments for a hollow Earth and polar shift and laid out my case in a book called Hollow Earth Mysteries and the Polar Shift. The books collected by my husband, Michael Callanan, were also a big help with this project. I glued together over 100 copies of this book, sending it to Asimov and Sagan and some news media and other individuals. Robert Gerard of Arcturus Books ordered copies of my first 3 books, so I did receive some income from all this activity. The gluing was bad for my health, I finally decided. I sent the first book to Gray Barker of Saussurian Press, the first publisher of Raymond Bernard's book, The Hollow Earth. Barker republished my first and second books, plus a book written by both Michael and myself. He didn't respond to my third book in 1985, and I later heard that he had died. Asimov responded to my third book because his name was in the title, Hollow Earth Apocalypse, Asimov's Warning. A young man called me from New York to Delaware to inform me that Asimov was going to have an essay published in response to my book. This was a short conversation, but the call was a strange incident. It had to have been arranged by Asimov. If he really thought my book was a lump of unreason, as I read 8 or 10 years later when I found the essay, why would he take the trouble to notify me about the forthcoming response on his part? It appeared in his collection Past, Present, and Future. I found evidence of SOS signs in this essay entitled The Hollow Earth. Another strange indirect contact with Asimov happened in 1987. I was entering a print shop in Chestertown, Maryland, when a man reached from behind me, touched my papers, and remarked that it looked as though I was having something printed up about Isaac Asimov. I said I thought Asimov was hinting about a polar shift on a hollow Earth. He answered back, quote, I know Isaac Asimov. I am in a club with him, unquote. I must have asked him what Asimov was like. He said Asimov was friendly and agreeable as long as he was the center of attention, otherwise not. This conversation went on, and finally I offered to let him read my 1985 book. He borrowed it, then sent it back with vague comments, neither favorable nor unfavorable. Much later, I decided this meeting could not have been accidental. If the timing hadn't been perfect, we never would have met. Besides that, no one else has ever approached me in a print shop and started a long conversation, or any conversation, really. This was a sign of Asimov's surveillance of me. In Lestam Gianni, Who Spies on People in Asimov's novel Foundation's Edge, the message, I am listening, can be found, each letter used exactly once. In Leonis Cheng, a colleague of Gianni's, we can find, I listen, I see each one who goes in, unquote. Spelling is bad in this one, though. Another colleague's name is Storgendable, and here we can find, quote, I be listening to R.A. Leedy, Leedy spelled with an I instead of a Y at the end. Adding the name of Gendable's companion, Sura Novi, we find, quote, I've been listening to you, R.A. Leedy. I believe you are going to be our savior, unquote. And the U is just a capital U. And the Leedy is still spelled with an I at the end. Okay, I want to give my first husband, Michael Callanan, credit for showing me the Mariner 7 photograph of Mars from August 4th, 1969, as found in Patrick Moore's Guide to Mars from 1978. To see a fully lighted South Polar cap on such a dark hemisphere was stunning. That photo became part of a sequence of 4 photos taken in order that prove Mars has polar openings lighted by a sun in its interior. The photo from the 1974 edition of the Encyclopedia Britannica was retouched a great deal to conceal the fact that the day side has to end near the right edge of the so-called polar cap. The perimeter of the photo was extended artificially. The lighted portion of the perimeter was extended artificially by darkening the background sky on a light copy of that picture, and even underneath the polar cap and beyond. The perimeter should only be visible for 180 degrees as Mars goes through phases, just as we see with the phases of the Moon. But on the Britannica photo, the perimeter is visible for around 230 degrees, which is impossible. It's just impossible. I don't think NASA was trying to fool the public with this rather crude retouching job that supposedly puts the South Polar Cap on the day side. I think they were hoping that a really obvious retouching job would help the public to realize that there is secrecy and fakery regarding the true shape of Mars and, by extension, the true shape of Earth. The Earth's magnetic field is approaching the point of a reversal, as shown by Jeremy Bloxham and David Gubbins in their Scientific American article of December 1989. The new North Magnetic Pole will be located somewhere in the present Southern Hemisphere, and vice versa. This event could be precipitated immediately by the emergence of another hot spot or core spot near Indonesia, the authors predict. A geomagnetic field reversal 80 million years ago resulted in a dramatic latitude change for the Washington, D.C. area, according to a CBS News report of January 20th, 2000. The Earth rolled, it was said. The report should have mentioned that this event is looming for us today, as Bloxham and Gubbins and many other experts have told us. But Bloxham and Gubbins should have mentioned that this event will probably shift the axis, as CBS described. In other words, each report is giving you part of the truth, not enough to get people excited and riled up. But if you put the reports together, it's serious. Okay, next time, we will consider where the new axis is likely to be established and the hazards that will be posed by the new equatorial bulge. I thank you all for your interest in a difficult subject. My website is at ruthleedycarr.com, and I am on Facebook. My books, Polar Hole Light in Europe's Clouds and Tipping Point for a Hollow Earth, are available on Amazon. Hope you can find time for at least 2 more sessions sponsored by Explora Books. I've enjoyed talking to you. So long for now.